welcome to today's webinar, Critical Considerations when Choosing a Security Awareness Training Vendor. How do you set yourself and your organization up for success? I'm Perry Carpenter. I'm KnowBe4's Chief Evangelist and Strategy Officer. I'm also the author of a book called Transformational Security Awareness, What Neuroscientists, Storytellers, and Marketers Can Teach Us About Driving Secure Behaviors. And what I want to do in today's session is really just walk us through, using the experience that I've had both leading large-scale security awareness programs and advising CISOs and security leaders around the world on how to approach security awareness. I want to walk us through some of the things that we should have in mind as we develop our training programs, and then as we figure out how vendor tools can support those training programs, and then what distinguishes one vendor from another. And so there's quite a lot in there, but I'm going to try to go through it in a very short amount of time so that we can get straight to the meat of the ideas here. But beforehand, let me just mention a little bit about KnowBe4. We are the world's most popular security awareness training and simulated phishing platform. We've been around since 2010. We are the highest and furthest to the right in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, and we've gotten there for a number of very important reasons that we're going to cover as we think about what distinguishes one tool from another. And as we get into that, I want you to really imagine yourself. If you're just now getting into security awareness for the first time, or if you've been there for a while, imagine yourself in the shoes of the people that you're delivering this information to, or the people that you're immersing within this program, because that's the critical thing. Is we're going to move from the idea of just throwing content out there and checking a box for the regulators to something that actually works and changes behavior and has a possibility of really protecting your organization or building greater security resilience in your organization. And that's really important because regardless of whether we're intentional or not, there is a security culture that lives and breathes in every organization that's out there. And even if you go, wait, we don't really have a security culture management program in your organization. Well, the fact is you still have a security culture. The question is how strong and how intentional and how sustainable is your security culture? And when you look at your security culture, what do you need to do about it to get it to where it needs to be? And so as we kind of lead in with that question, I want to introduce our agenda for today. We're going to talk about what organizations should consider when planning a security awareness program, and then we'll move into how the vendor community can help, and then specifically what makes KnowBe4 unique within the market. So that is quite a lot to cover, and I want to start with a couple of foundational ideas around what organizations should consider when planning a security awareness program, what you should consider as you begin planning your program or refining the program that's already there. First of all is we know inherently that we have a duty when it comes to security awareness. If you've ever had that feeling of, oh man, I don't know why I just did that thing. It's kind of like if you've gone driving down the street, you've left your neighborhood, you're on your way to the thing that you're going to, and you're under a time crunch, and you go, oh man, I think I left the garage door open, or I think I left the oven on, and you have that moment of, I knew better than that. I actually meant to do the right thing at the right time, but for some reason, it just escaped me. And security awareness is important because of that, is we're dealing with humans. We're dealing with people who are in a hurry, who are juggling several different priorities at a time, and we all tend to make mistakes. And so security awareness is fundamentally important because those mistakes then can lead to breaches and issues related to security within our organization that can affect the confidentiality of data, the integrity of the data, the availability of data, and then ultimately our duty of care of that data when it comes to the customers that we serve and our stakeholders and our shareholders and the regulators that we need to report to, and so on. And so this is critically important. And what tends to happen is traditionally organizations have, quote unquote, done security awareness, and they think they've got it all together. They've provided the right information. They've given people the facts that they think that they need to know, the behaviors that are expected. They've shown them the policies, and they think that things are going to be great. But as the well-known poet Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Is we think that we know what we're going to do in the time that it matters. We may have even made a mental picture about the way that we would react, but everything changes in the heat of the moment when the thing really goes down. And the only way to get over that, to start to react in a more predictable way, is to build the right patterns of behavior in, so that those become less abstract mental constructs of what we think that we're going to do in the time, and they become more physical, habitual types of behaviors that recur over time anytime a stimulus is given. And that's a change from the way that organizations have approached this in the past. The harsh reality is that most organizations, and if you're approaching this for the first time, this is probably how you've done it in the past, is most organizations fail to account for what I call the knowledge intention behavior gap. And simply stated, it's this. We assume traditionally that if we give people the right information, that they will naturally care about that. And that even if they don't care about it, that they'll do it because we've provided the information and we've shown them that it's important. And they believe that it's something that's required of them as an employee. Now, the problem with that is we know that information alone never changes action, especially if you're a parent. You give your kids information all day long about what you're hoping that they will do. Whether they actually do that thing or not is a different story. And even in our own lives, if we have the right information and we know the things that are going to be important, and even when we intend to do those things, doesn't necessarily mean the behavior is going to come. You know, think about New Year's resolutions, where you make that list and you say, I'm going to eat better, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to save more money, spend more time with my family, do all these different things that people traditionally say that they're going to do. They commit to do them. They know the benefits of it. They tell friends and family about their commitments. And then the vast majority of people don't follow through with that. Come second, third week of January, it's a distant memory because the overriding behavior pattern of the now takes control. And they don't have those habits ingrained. But the truth is whatever is ingrained through habit is the thing that people will do, or whatever is easiest is what people tend to do. And so that's what we're wrestling with when we think about security awareness that results in behavior change. And that leads us into a couple more little facets that I want to get into before we talk about the vendor community. These are what I've coined as 3 realities of security awareness. And you need to keep these in mind as you develop a program. The first one really maps straight into that knowledge intention behavior gap. Is just because I'm aware doesn't mean that I care. We throw tons of policies and procedures and informational sound bites to our people. But just like you and I, just because we get information, just because we're aware of something doesn't mean that we care. I mean, how many of us that drive past speed limit signs and we see that speed limit sign as a recommendation? We don't see it as kind of a binary decision of we do this, or if we don't do this, we're clearly in the wrong. No, we see that as a risk-based calculus. And we look at that speed limit sign and we say, do I really want to follow that based on my schedule, based on road conditions, based on what's going on in my car, based on my other priorities of the day or my mindset? And then we build that risk calculus, and then we say, do I follow that or not? And frankly, most of us just take that under advisement. We don't take that as something that we just lock into and follow rigidly. And the same thing is true with our employees. When we give a security policy, they're doing the same thing in their minds. They're taking that under advisement if they remember it at all. And then they're saying, well, what are my priorities? What do I need to do to get my work done? What are the systems feel like? Is it convenient or not? Does this slow me down? Does this further my objectives? And the problem is we expect our people to process information and to behave differently than we as security professionals do ourselves. We're all, at the end of the day, we're all culpable of the same types of mindsets. And so what it comes down to is our users, when they don't follow policy or when they make mistakes like that, they're not stupid, they're human. And in fact, they're just like you and me as security leaders. The second thing in this 3 realities of security awareness is if we try to work against human nature, we will fail every single time. So the way that I phrase this a lot, especially when I was at Gartner with CISOs on the line, I would say, if there's a gap between your policy expectations and your behavioral reality, it's probably because your policy is not expecting people to be human. It's expecting them to be data crunching computers that just take on information and then act accordingly. And again, we don't do that as humans. And so if we try to work against human nature, we will fail. So that the pivot point there is we have to find ways to work with human nature rather than against it. And then that leads us into reality number 3. What our employees do is way more important than what they know. And here's the clearest way that I can express this. Knowledge alone has never stopped an organization from having a breach. Knowledge alone has never stopped an organization from having a breach. It is a behavior that leads to breach or not. And so whether people know that they're behaving the right way or not, or whether they know that they've made a mistake or not, it is that behavior component that will either create resilience within an organization or will allow the breach to occur. And so, again, and I'm kind of beating this to death at this point, but unless we focus on behavior, we're not actually changing the resilience of the organization. Even back in the 1980s, if you flash back and you think about the old G.I. Joe cartoons and the public service announcements around that, when they talked about information, they would say, and now you know, and then the second line with that is knowing is half the battle. Well, information is important, but there still has to be that acting on the information in order to build resilience. And in fact, I would even argue that we can build behaviors in the absence of information and still get what we want. And so that's another thing. There are people that will just naturally do the right thing, and we want to find ways to build support for that as well. And then there are people that in the face of information will still naturally do the wrong thing, and we need to find ways to channel that behavior where we want it to go as well. And here's why this happens. And this comes to a field that's called behavioral economics. A guy named Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize for his work, describes 2 types of thinking, system 1 and system 2. And system 1 is very fast. It's based on shortcuts, or what we in the computer world call heuristics. It is emotion driven. It really governs about 95% of what we do. And when you think about autopilot, or when you think about terms like knee-jerk reaction or natural behavior, doing without thinking, that is system 1. Uh, and it's great. It's a time saver. It saves us energy. It governs 95% of what we do. Now, the problem is that we feel like we're rational when we do that. And science proves that we're really not rational. We do these things and then we find a way after the fact to back it up with logic. Now, there is a system two type of thinking that's much slower and more methodical. It takes effort, it takes time, and that is really only that 5%. And you have to intentionally move into system two thinking. It feels like, and the best example that I can give you is if I gave you an algebra problem and you had to pull out a pen and paper and start to solve that, that's system two. It's methodical, it's effort driven, it's logical, and our brains, our minds don't like it. They want to move us back into system one as soon as possible. And even as we go through those system two process driven types of times in our life or problems that we're trying to solve, our mind is trying to find shortcuts for us. And so that's where we are as a species. And that's what we have to work with as security awareness leaders as we try to build programs that will build resilience and change behavior and do all the things that we're hoping to achieve when we build a security awareness program. And the reason really that people behave in these irrational ways in the face of information is also based on just the fact that there's always different context in ways that people are processing information. And so based on a conversation beforehand that day, I may process information and come to conclusions completely differently than if I didn't have that conversation. Or even if I had had a tense moment with my spouse, the way that I hear and process information will change. The way that I hear and process a context that I'm in will change. And that's why when somebody's rushed or emotionally in a higher state, they're more likely to fall for a phishing scam or phishing test if you're doing those. And so we have to be aware that people are not computers. People live in an ecosystem, and that ecosystem influences all of their thought and behavior. And so why don't we get into then how vendors can help you approach this really this context that we are trying to step into, which is broader thinking around security awareness, where it's not information only, but it is kind of both sides of the equation, information and behavior, and understanding those gaps and moving in to close the gaps and to drive the behaviors that we want. Well, the first thing is we have to think about the critical components of a security awareness program, because those are going to be the areas that you're going to be looking for vendor support in, or you're going to be asking the question, can I build this myself in some way? Or is it both? Is it I build some components of it that match my corporate culture, and then I come in and supplement and reinforce with vendor tools? And so when I was at Gartner advising CISOs, these are the things that I was helping people think through. First of all, content is what is that wrapper for information, because there is going to be an informational component. If you're a regulated organization, or you've got policies that you need to expose people to, or if you need to expose people to the fundamentals of a scam or some critical nugget of information, there will be information that needs to be delivered. And we'll talk about how to make that impactful in a minute, but there is always going to be that informational component within a security awareness program. It's just where we are. And so what that means is content is going to be really, really important. And the way I think about it is that content is king. It is one of the most fundamentally important things, because as humans, we're really polarized by the way that information gets delivered to us. If you open Netflix or Amazon Prime, or even if you don't use any of those services and then you just hit the TV guide on whatever TV system you have, you gravitate towards different styles of content than other people do. And that's why there's such variety in the marketplace when it comes to entertainment. And the same is true of our people in our organizations. Different types of content in different styles, different lengths of time, and a whole host of other flavors will resonate with different pockets of your internal employee population different than other pieces. And it's really important not to approach this as a one-size-fits-all endeavor. And so content is king. You want to be able to think through the different types of employees that you have and match discrete types of content to those employee types or roles within your organization, the different levels of information that they might need presented to them. And so that's going to be really important. You also need things that are going to help you get and maintain the executive support that you need so that you can continue to get slivers of time from your employees. And you can also start to prove the value of the organization, continue to prove the value of the program to your executive team as well. And then also to show the regulators, the auditors, and so on that you're doing the right things. And then you need campaign support materials, because this should not be a one and done type of thing where you just throw information out and hope for the best. You need to approach this as a marketing endeavor. You're trying to change hearts and minds at the end of the day. And when you think about it, here, this is one of those other areas where people have just done it wrong for so long, is they'll do a once a year training event. They'll pack people into a room and talk about security for a couple hours. And they check the box for the compliance guy or girl. And then they move on and say, we've done that. And then they get frustrated when bad things happen. Well, the truth is, and marketers know this, is that just doesn't work. If you want to change behavior, you have to constantly be getting in front of people and promoting your essentially your brand or your idea, so that you, at the point where that behavior or that information hits the context of their life, that you influence the decision. This is why with McDonald's or Coca-Cola or anybody else, you don't just see one ad a year, because that's ineffective. No, instead, you'll be driving and you'll see a billboard. You'll be listening to your radio and you'll hear an advertisement. You'll turn on your TV or YouTube and you'll be interrupted with an advertisement. You'll be at a store and you'll see a sign. And so all these are little prompts for our attention that are intended to embed that brand or that idea within our mind, so that at the point where it's time to say, oh, I'm hungry, what am I going to eat? Or I'm thirsty, what am I going to drink? Or if it's something like Pampers trying to sell diapers. Oh, now I have a child and I'm trying to think of the product that's going to be best for them. Well, that's the brand association that now comes to mind. And even in stores, they'll prompt that even more. They'll put end caps in. So now you see that brand reflected more prominently than any other brand. So at the point of decision of which one am I going to go with, it's not only prominent, it's easy to make that choice. And that easiness is also critical to how we work with rather than against human nature. Now, let's hit these last three. Testing. We have to be able to put people in the situation where they're going to naturally be having to make that decision that relates to breach or not within your organization. So things like phishing simulations, social engineering simulations, where your employees are going to be prompted to either click a link or report that phish or do nothing. And there's reasons and good and bad. Well, there's not good that comes with clicking, but there's good and bad that comes with either just deleting that phish or reporting it. If you delete it, at least you've not been infected or put the organization at greater risk yourself. But if you delete it without reporting, you've also potentially let other people fall into the trap, and you've let the organization go forward longer not being aware of an issue. So we are really big advocates, and in the security industry in general, we're really big advocates for reporting. That's why you see these see something, say something campaigns. If a phishing email comes into somebody's inbox and they recognize it as a phishing campaign, well, they've seen that. We want them to say something about it. And so the vendor tools that support that in the industry are phish alert buttons. And most vendors have an equivalent of that right now. And it's all around reporting suspected phish. So not only are you putting somebody in the situation where they have to react to the phish and they either get phished or not, but then you're also giving them the opportunity to report and do the right thing for the organization to increase resilience. And if they fall for the phish, then you need to have the ability to do just-in-time training so that you build a learning moment into that. And that's something that most of the vendors in this space also offer. Then we get into metrics and reporting. Again, why? Because we need to know where we are and we need to be able to show that we're closing those gaps. And that's critical to maintaining executive support. It's also critical for adapting our campaigns, knowing what we need to do differently. And I think most of us on the call today, we understand the value of metrics and reporting. If something is worth doing, it's something worth measuring so that we can refine it, so that we know exactly where we are and we know what we're doing well and the things that we could improve on. And then we get into surveys and assessments. This is tools that can help you understand the attitudes of your organization, the things that they're hoping to see. So it's basically surveys. You understand that implicitly. But the difference here is that you're trying to understand some subtle nuances of the culture of your organization. Also, how well some of the content or program elements that you're sending out, how well those are resonating with your people so that you can adapt. And then ultimately, really just this is a pulse. And so anytime you're doing a survey or an assessment, you're doing a pulse check for where you are. This is subtly different than metrics because it gets into things that are harder to measure, like opinion or frame of mind or preference and so on. So here's a sobering truth. I said a second ago, or a couple of minutes ago, that content is king. And here's how I think about it in the context of security awareness. This is also things like the other elements about how you phish or social engineer your employees to put them in that mindset of what's it like to be attacked. Your awareness program and your content are the visible face of your department to the rest of your company. So it's like this. If you're a CISO in a large organization, you may interact with probably less than 1% of your employee base. If I'm at and I've been at 20,000 person organizations, I've also been at sub 1,000 person organizations. And as a security leader, really you might only interact with between 20 people and 100 people regularly within a year. Well, if I'm in a 20,000 person organization, I only have personal relationships with a fraction of that employee population. And even if I'm at 1,000 person organization and I interact with 20, 50, or 100 people regularly, well, then I still only hit about 10% of that population at the most. And that other 90%, they don't know me. They just see the things that I put out there and that I do. So for me as a security leader, I have to think about this as this is my reputation. And so anything that I put out in front of my employee population has to be as good or better than anything else that the organization is doing. Otherwise, security will be seen as other. It will be seen as less than. It will be seen as not important or not part of the way that the organization really does things. It's this afterthought. And so really take that to heart. That's a critical thing that CISOs or security leaders need to get right, is this stuff that we push out to our organization. If we cut corners on it, if we say it's good enough when it's not, and we just throw stuff out there, just to get it done, we're actually creating a bad name and a bad reputation for ourselves, because our people look at that and it falls flat. And by association, we fall flat, and nobody wants that. The other things that we need to think about from a program development point of view is that learning doesn't just happen at one point in time. Like I was talking about with marketing campaigns, we need to be thinking about the entire context of somebody's experience. And so when you think about corporate training, about 10% of corporate training is formal. That's the time that you can allot from somebody. And that should only be about 10% of your program. You need to be thinking about ways to address the other 90% of somebody's experience in your organization. So how do you provide informal supports? Things like how do you build Ask Me Anythings? How do you build canned webinars that people can partake of on their own? Policy collections that people can go to on their own, security interfaces where people can ask questions, and so on. So how do you build that informal community where people can plug in and get the information that they need when they're actually seeking? And then the other thing is that about 70% of the way that people learn and react within their organization is experiential. It's just based on the modeling of behavior that they see other people do. It's the sharing of information and experience that happens as we're shoulder to shoulder working in our different offices or pod environments or so on. And we hit a little stopping point and we ask our neighbor for something, or we look over their shoulder and we see how they're solving a problem. Well, that's that 70%. And from a security aspect, if we're ignoring that 70% social component or kind of cultural component of security, we're actually putting ourselves at a disadvantage. And so we have to think about this in ways to address that entire 100%. And again, vendor tools can help with this. Vendor support systems can help with this. And that's one of the things that you need to be looking at as you move away from this check the box type of approach where it's once a year, and start thinking about ways to do this in a more proactive way where you're addressing behavior and you're trying to really change hearts and minds. And so also be thinking about moments of need. So the first time somebody comes in the organization, that's a first time point of need, or when they're wanting to learn more, they're going to actively engage. And then you get to just-in-time experiences. And there's some good supports out there that can inject just-in-time learning, but this is the way that works. When somebody is trying to apply knowledge or remember something, you either need to have a system that can inject that in, or you have to have a culture where if somebody asks their neighbor that information is ready at hand, or a whole host of other ways that we could approach this. How about when something goes wrong and they need to get more information? How do you deal with that? Or when something in the environment changes, what are your systems for communicating or reinforcing the newly constructed behavior expectations that are there, or knowledge expectations that may be there? And then we want to think about different profiles or segments of learners wherever possible. And so this is all about things like role-based training or preference-based training. For instance, what I teach people in a call center will probably be different than the types of things that somebody within the IT department needs to learn from a security perspective. There's subtly different expectations. At the same time, the culture within a call center is different than the culture in IT. And so the types of materials and the flavor of the material that I put in front of them might need to be different. We could take that a step further and we could say demographically, if there are different types of people that have entirely different learning styles in your organization, and some people respond better to 3 to 5 minute funny videos, well, then you need to be able to put something like that in front of them, because they'll naturally resonate with that better. They'll absorb the information better and they'll look forward to it. But then you may have some people on your executive team where they feel talked down to if you put that kind of thing, or they feel like that type of content is beneath them. And so you have to find a way to engage them. So again, with the idea that content is king, we need to be able to pivot around all of those different things. And then we also need to be able to have the right measurement tools in place so that we can see if those individual adjustments are getting us to where we hope that we will be from a security attitudes perspective, with things like surveys, and especially from a security behavior perspective, but then also from a security knowledge perspective. And we need to work with the reality of human nature. This goes back to security awareness reality number 2. And this comes from a behavior researcher that I follow by the name of BJ Fogg. And he says there's 3 realities about human nature. We're lazy, we're social, and we're creatures of habit. And so we have to design for this. How do we deal with the fact that people are going to want to take shortcuts? How do we deal with that social component and the fact that people will behave like the people that are around them, and they'll want to model different behaviors based on the people that they're around? And then how do we deal with the habit pieces of it? Then we also want to get into understanding just the way that we process information, from being kind of blissfully ignorant at the very beginning to starting to become aware of something to then building a habit. And so this is a really well-known model, but I do want you to wrap your mind around it for a second, is when somebody has lack of awareness, they are what we would call unconsciously incompetent. They don't know that they don't know something, and they just behave accordingly. Well, when we get to traditional awareness, we might be able to move somebody into conscious incompetence, which is they now realize that they don't have all the tools and the knowledge that they need, and say, I don't, I know that I don't know all of this. And so we then kind of hope that will propel them into the next stage, which is I know something, but I have to think about it a little bit. So they either have to go access information that's stored somewhere else, or they have to enter that, really intentionally, that system 2 thinking, where they're parsing information in their minds and trying to weigh all the options and then come to the right conclusion. And then this last one, this is kind of the nirvana state of information, is we get this unconscious competence. This is where most of us are with pattern-based behaviors like driving or brushing our teeth, things that used to be really, really difficult. We can actually build unconscious competence in. The problem with where most traditional security programs have left things is that they stay in the kind of bucket 1 and 2, where there's a lot of things where people just don't know that they don't know. And we then end up stopping at just raising the red flag, but we don't know how to get people into stage 3 and stage 4. If we get people in step 3 and step 4 within this, then we've naturally gotten to a place where we're engaging our people, where we're changing behavior. We're starting to see the right results. And so that's ultimately where we want to get. That's ultimately where we want to push through. And the good thing is that if we build good, sustained campaigns, we're building all the things that will foster people into that movement in stage 3 and stage 4. And ultimately, from a breach perspective, it's that stage 4, that reflex-like behavior where we have people that are unconsciously just doing the right thing. That's the thing that's going to be that protective mechanism. And that's the thing that constant training and simulation will start to push people into. So all of this, just to push this marketing analogy through, all of this gets into things like multi-channel campaigns, where you have different types of content at different times, targeting different audiences, going through different channels, so that you have this constant barrage of information and working with the context that people are in. The other thing that you need to be able to do is constantly build reflexes and build muscle memory for your people. And so that's that testing component. And I would recommend regardless of the tool that you're using, even if you're doing this homegrown, at least every 30 days, you need to put somebody in a simulated social engineering type of test, like a phishing test, so that you build muscle memory. And ultimately, when you're doing both of these, you're hitting a hearts and mind campaign the way that a marketer would over a period of time through different channels, through different mediums, and so on. You're doing that, so then you're starting to build influence within the mind. And then when you start to supplement with frequent simulated phishing attacks or social engineering attacks, well, then you're starting to build the muscle memory on top of that so that people naturally react in the right way. So at the right time, somebody has some of the right information recall, or they at least know where to go to ask more information. And then from a reflex perspective, they're naturally doing the right things, reacting in the ways that you're hoping that they will react. That's the key to building resilience. So that then pushes us into this last section. This last section is, where does know before fit within this? So we talked about the fact that these are the types of things that you should be looking for as you think about the vendor community. And I don't want to speak for other vendors because that would not be fair to them. But let me tell you what I believe makes know before unique. And I want to start with kind of a prophecy that I put forward to the market a couple of years ago. So these are 2 slides that I created in early 2017. And back when I used to run the Magic Quadrant for security awareness at Gartner, I had actually written about this in the prior Magic Quadrants as well. And so this is something that I had talked about and evangelized for a while, but these are the 2 slides that I created in 2017 as I was talking about this. And I want to walk through these with you because it's going to be critically important in a second. So I talked about these as future trends in 2017. We needed things that are flexible and adaptive. So greater context awareness and real-time intervention. So this is getting to the heart of behavior. The fact that people are making split-second decisions, and we need systems that will flex with and adapt with the learner and then inject things at a point that's contextually relevant to them. Focus on time savings for people because our minds are overloaded with information and organizations have a lot of expectations about how people spend their time. So micro-learning, behavioral baselining, test outs if somebody demonstrates competence, and then fine-grain roles and rules so that you're only getting people that need certain bits of information, that information, rather than scattershot. Everybody gets the same thing, even if it's not relevant. Systems would be smarter, broader use of AI and machine learning. And we've seen trends like that within the larger security industry and the IT industry, but some specific adaptations within the security awareness and training markets. And then pluggable integration with traditional security tools, because that gives us behavioral insights that then we can start to take on board and really adapt and move into this flexible and adaptive learning environment, so that John, who sits next to Mary, gets an entirely different learning path based on the way that he behaves and the types of risks that that person may open the organization to, or the natural risks that that role has associated with it. And then sneakier, better automated social engineering use cases based on AI, based on learning about that individual person, the same way that an attacker would do all of their reconnaissance and understand some of the nuances of different people or departments. This would be built into systems and tools for this market. Learner sensitive and aware, I kind of wove that conversation through a few other points that I mentioned. More flavorful, this gets into content, more variety of content, styles, tones, and formats. And then assistive, systems that would naturally encourage greater program maturity. So those 2 slides were prophecy for the market a couple years ago, and what I was telling people to be on the lookout for. Now, the good news for us at KnowBe4 is that those future trends are current reality and how we build the product and how that product is manifesting itself today. And so we do have broad use of AI in our platform, broad use of things that help understand the nuance of the way that people learn. And we're evolving our platform constantly to take advantage of all those things. We have more content than anyone else on the market. And so we are really thinking about the different learning styles and things like that that are there. So we've really embraced all of those things. And I think that that makes us unique because, frankly, I haven't seen the other vendors in the market jumping on those things and making those types of innovative leaps. And so what was future prophecy for the market back then has been adopted in a lot of ways by Know before, but I haven't seen the general market follow near as fast. And so I do see that as unique. The other thing that makes us unique is that we are the largest security awareness provider in the world, about just over 30,000, and that's growing. So by the time you listen to this, it will be significant more than that. So I in many times when I talk about this now, I just say tens of thousands of customers because our growth is so rapid because people understand the value proposition that we have, and they understand the innovativeness that we have. And that is really the success for or the key to the success that we've had over the past few years. We have about 1,000 employees, offices in 9 different countries, and we're demonstrably the world's most popular vendor in this space with the most proven results. So here's another distinguishing factor. Something else that makes us unique is that customers love us. So regardless of the forum that you get on and start to do research around security awareness vendors, what you'll find is that there are an order of magnitude more reviews and customer experiences that have been recorded for us than any other vendor. In fact, I could take most of the other vendors that are in something like a Magic Quadrant, and I could add up all their reviews, and we have more than everybody else combined. Additionally, we have more 5-star reviews than most other companies combined when you start to look at that. So that shows that over and over and over again, Know before is showing their value and they're delivering on their value. And so one of the things that happens to us as humans is that we build expectations of what will be delivered to us. And then those expectations get dashed by most vendors and most experiences that we enter into. What really gets reflected when you see a 5-star review is that the experience has either met or exceeded the expectation. And I think we've shown that over and over and over again. In fact, in this data that I collected in November 2019, which is the month that I'm recording this right now, we have over 1,065-star reviews in Gartner Peer Insights. We've won awards from Frost & Sullivan. We're consistently mentioned in things like analyst user roundtables and industry roundtables as one of customers' most favorite vendors and most respected vendors. We also have thought leadership that is not reflected in any other company within this market, from well-known, long-time security experts like Kevin Mitnick, who's our chief hacking officer, to Win Schwartau, who is the guy that first talked about a digital Pearl Harbor and is really foundationally relevant within the history of information security for his thought leadership. To people like myself who have worked with companies around the world and have written what I think is the definitive book on security awareness, to people like Roger Grimes, who's written, I think, 12 information security books now, thousands upon thousands of articles for CSO and other organization magazines, to somebody like Javad Malik, who's in the UK and is a well-known, respected, award-winning blogger and vlogger, to Kai Rohr, the guy that created the security culture framework and all the measurement tools and standards around security culture, to Joanna Heisman from Gartner, who is writing the definitive research for the industry on security awareness, to Jim Shields, the creator and the founder of Twist and Shout that created really an industry-changing paradigm on how to deliver training with comedy series. And we've seen that emulated by other companies around the world since then, but he's the innovator behind that. And we've actually tapped him, and we use him not only to continue doing those things, but to get into other genres that have been groundbreaking. To somebody like Rosa Smothers, who is a CIA intelligence officer, and really understands the federal space well, from just the way that organizations need to serve that space, to also understanding all the different attacks and techniques that nation states use when targeting, of course, governments, but also organizations and individuals as well. You don't find that in any other vendor in this space. So I think that that's unique and compelling. Our platform for testing and training is one of these things that it fits all of those areas that I mentioned and what people need to be thinking about as they develop their programs. We have supports for getting executive buy-in. We have supports for planning your program. We've got all the largest content library in the world. We are the Netflix of security awareness in a lot of ways. We have the surveys and assessments. We have the easiest to use simulated phishing platform in the market as well, and the most cost-effective deployment models. And so when you get into this and you start to evaluate KnowBe4 compared to the competition, one of the things that you'll want to think about is ease of use and time to deploy. And that's where the tools around creating your phishing campaigns or selecting content and all that are going to be differentiating. And so KnowBe4 was created for non-IT specialists to get up and running extremely fast with the tool sets that are powerful enough that any security professional in the world would still feel like they've got a wealth of riches in front of them. And so that's distinguishing, because most of the other vendors in the market have fairly complex tool sets that take a lot of time, and some even paid consulting in order to deploy. Whereas we build everything that you need into the platform and the experience, and we don't sell consulting. We automatically give you a support staff member that we call a customer service manager, who is assigned to your account. Their job is to ensure that you're successful, that you're delivering on what you hope that you were going to get out of the program, and that we are meeting or exceeding expectations. The other thing is things like Active Directory integration that actually works out of the box. So there's no surprises. There's no what we hear with a lot of other vendors is that they say that they have Active Directory integration, and it really just doesn't work. It disappoints. So when you're testing and you're doing proof of concepts within this market, do actually test the AD integration, because that's going to be one of those things that's differentiating as well, and shows you what the implementation experience is going to be like. From a reporting perspective, we have reporting riches galore. And so what we've done is we've created some very easy to understand reports that at an eye shot give you the status of where you are, also help you compare against organizations like you or in other verticals. But we also have really gone through and we've asked the question, what are the most complex scenarios that somebody might want to show measurement for? And we've built 60 plus custom reports that can easily be generated that use our AI and machine learning platform on the back end to drive some insights out of that as well. And ultimately, the idea is that we also facilitate that reporting piece. And again, this is something that many organizations are looking for. Many vendors do have phish reporting buttons, but we also have a nuance to that I'll talk about in just a second. But the whole idea is to move people from being somebody who is vulnerable to somebody who is not only resilient, but then a protector, a defender for the organization. And we are the only vendor. I talked about Jim Shields before, and the innovative things that he's doing around video training. We are the only vendor who has won an award at Cannes for corporate media and TV, and that was for a new series that we put out several months ago at this point, called The Inside Man. And we were trying to answer the question, what would Netflix do if they were to create and market a security awareness series? And it's won awards and gotten a ton of great attention around the world for the engaging way that it trains people without them even knowing that they're being trained. And then I talked about what happens after you report a phish. And so we have another product that we sell called PhishER, which is it's a lightweight security orchestration and automation and response tool, a SOAR tool. And it's something that can be used in your SOC or an incident responder or even just an overworked security professional to easily categorize and understand what's going on with the phish that have been reported so that they can release phish that need to be released or suspected phish that actually turned out to be legit, or can easily categorize and deal with the onslaught of phish that may be sent to them. And so this is a really good tool that helps people make sense of all that reporting that can come through when you're actually facilitating the behavior that you want, which is that see something, say something behavior. And so with that, I'll just leave you with the thought that security awareness doesn't have to be hard. The vendor community has really been stepping up their game over the past 5 years and supplying a lot of the tools, the technologies and supports that you need in order to be successful so that you don't have to do this alone. And I do think that KnowBe4 is uniquely positioned. When you start to compare us to the competition, we stand head and shoulders above the competition in the ease of use, the breadth of support, and the excellence within the way that we've architected everything. So if you have any questions, I'm always open to being contacted. Here's my contact information. If you're watching this, you may already be working with a salesperson or a customer service rep. They're well equipped to answer your questions as well. But the long story short is we're here to help, and we're here to make sure that you are successful and that your expectations for what can be achieved in security awareness have been exceeded. Thanks so much.